All right. Hello, and everyone, and welcome. Thanks for being here on time, right at 2 p.m. I really appreciate it. We're going to give folks another minute or two to come on in, and then we'll get started with our content. If you want to drop in the chat your name, where you're calling in from, and what organization you're with, that'd be great. All right, I'm going to go ahead and kick us off. Thank you for introducing yourselves. I'm seeing a lot of familiar names and organizations, so thank you all for being here. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Mackenzie Rutherford, and I'm the Senior Organizing Associate with the Southern California Association of Nonprofit Housing, also known as SCANPH. I'm also the Regional Organizing Coordinator for Residents United Network of Los Angeles. I'm really, really excited to introduce today's panel, which is How to Get Housing in LA, Navigating Entry Points and Barriers to Affordable Housing. Before we head into the content, I just wanted to share a few housekeeping notes. We will be recording this session. We're already recording this session, and we will share the recording after today's event. We will also be sharing any presentations that are shared, any slides that are shared during the event. And at the end of the session, there will be an audience Q&A. If you have any questions during the session, please put them in the Q&A. We won't be monitoring the chat, so if you want the panelists to see your questions, make sure that they're in the Q&A. All right, thank you all for being here. Let's get started. If my slides work. All right, the agenda for today is I'm going to do some introductions of the organizations that are hosting today's event. Then I'll pass it over to our first speaker, who will talk a little bit about affordable housing entry points. Our second speaker, which will talk about navigating the affordable housing process from the developer side and resident side. And then finally, I'll pass it to our final two speakers that'll talk about the updated Los Angeles Affordable and Accessible Housing Registry. Then at the end, we'll finish out with some audience Q&A. Some quick introductions of the organizations hosting today's event. The Southern California Association of Nonprofit Housing, I'm sure many of you are very familiar with. We're a policy advocacy and membership organization composed of nonprofit affordable housing developers and others involved in affordable housing that work together to advocate for policy that leads to the development of more affordable housing. And we work closely at SCANPH with the Residents United Network, which is a statewide network, and we have our own region here in LA. And it's a network of residents of affordable housing and allies that center lived experience in affordable housing policy. We are really excited to be joined by 4 changemakers in the affordable housing community, including Mark Tousignant, the Director of Vulnerable Populations at Enterprise Community Partners, Monica Mejia, the President and CEO of the East LA Community Corporation, Angela Maciel, the Senior Management Analyst of the Accessible Housing Program at the Los Angeles Housing Department, and Isabel Hershey-Reyes, the Senior Product Manager at Exigy. So to kick us off today, I'm going to hand it over to Mark to get us started and talk a little bit about the process of accessing affordable housing and permanent supportive housing in LA.
Thanks, Mackenzie. It's great to be with you. Thanks for making space for this topic. I think it's just so important that we try to, provide a little context and education on this process, which can be very complicating. So I'm really here to talk about the supportive housing process, which is obviously a small, well, sizable, but still sort of a share of the overall process to get into affordable housing. It's a little bit different for a couple of reasons. One is because this is true really across the country, certainly in LA. In order to access supportive housing here in LA, you need to go through the regional coordinated entry system. And so I'll talk a little bit about CES in a second, but that is definitely a distinction from regular affordable housing. And it's also different because it's more of a community decision around who's going to be placed into those supportive housing opportunities or resources. And the contrast being with affordable housing, it's generally more based on that site, that building, and sort of like, usually going through like a wait list process and your name being called, and you kind of work your way through that when the housing's available. So anyway, with respect to PSH, I mean, in the old days, like I said, you kind of go through these wait lists and you would sort of compete that way, and there was sort of a recognition that that wasn't necessarily working the best for those that needed supportive housing. And so there was a shift about, I guess it was 2013, so it's over 10 years ago now, where the federal government said, hey, for communities that are receiving homelessness assistance through our continuum of care program, which is kind of the biggest form of federal grants for homeless assistance, we want to sort of shift things up and make sure that there's a more equitable process to access housing and sort of determine who needs, the right service intervention or housing placement. And so, what they asked these communities to do, and became a mandate, was develop a process to ensure that all people experiencing a housing crisis have fair and equal access and are quickly identified, assessed for, referred, and connected to housing and assistance based on their strengths and needs. The goal was to make it a more consistent experience for those that were seeking support to exit homelessness and really get housed. It was also a way to distribute resources across the system a little bit more equitably to achieve that goal. And for the folks that are kind of deemed the most vulnerable in our communities, that have the most disabilities, the sort of the highest barriers around housing, access, and stability, the goal was to really make sure they had a fair and even footing to really be able to access these resources. There's limited supportive housing in our communities relative to need, so we got to make some tough decisions around kind of how we can support that. And that's essentially the gist of it, right, in terms of what's different. In LA, that process is called CEF, and you'll hear that kind of acronym quite a bit. It's been in operation for over 10 years. LA was kind of one of the early adopters of that process, compared to other communities across the country. And it's overseen by the LA Homeless Services Authority, which is the lead agency for the LA Continuum of Care. So I'm not going to get too much into the mechanics of kind of how it works. I mean, that could literally be its own session. But I will just try to drop in the chat if you wanted to kind of refer to LAHSA's website for more information on that, definitely encourage you to do that, because there's a lot more to it. But in terms of accessing really the spirit of today, right? How do you access supportive housing and certainly go through the CES system? Well, what they're looking for is really some touch point with the homeless assistance system. So that means you're either going into one of the access centers across the county, you're connected through some sort of street outreach program, or you could be in an interim housing program, like a shelter program, and sort of be connected that way. But they want to see some service contact, some active point of contact, in terms of a caseworker that's working with you and some record of service, really within the last 90 days. So they don't want to go too far out. They want to know it's a recent sort of contact. The other thing is they want an assessment to be done on you to understand kind of what those needs are around supportive services and sort of housing assistance. So those together kind of generate some sort of understanding of maybe what the best fit's going to be. Information is loaded into a federal database that's basically called the HMIS system, Homeless Management Information System. This is sort of managed by the Continuum of Care. And that is essentially generating a list of folks in the community that need support, need housing. And so when units become available in the community, that's really where the system is going to draw from in terms of where they could find a potential placement. For those that need supportive housing, they're really kind of ranking at the high end of that sort of assessment spectrum, where they're really kind of the highest acuity, they're really the biggest needs in terms of services and housing. And so that's kind of who's being established as a priority for PSH placement. And that is really something that is managed in terms of those thresholds for placement by the Continuum of Care. Specifically, there's a CES Policy Council that kind of dictates that prioritization criteria. So now, in terms of where you could be placed, say you were kind of prioritized, it could be just in a private unit in the market, a landlord that's connected to some rent subsidy or client that's bringing that with them, or it could be in a site-based program that's more like a project-based situation, we call, where like a mission-driven or nonprofit is owning that particular apartment building, and it could be dedicated fully or partially towards folks exiting homelessness. And it's really that latter model that really Enterprise is most kind of connected to, because we've been working with both public partners and LAHSA and other nonprofit owners that have PSH in their inventory to try to make the rehousing process a little smoother, a little more efficient, more effective. and with the goal to make it even quicker for folks to resolve their homelessness, and also that we're not creating any situations where housing resources are going underutilized or unutilized because we can't necessarily make that connection with an appropriate household. So that's kind of the overview of kind of generally what I wanted to describe. I want to just give you a little bit of illustration of how it works on the ground. Okay, so I'm just going to try to share my screen and pull up kind of a flow chart that talks through a little bit of what that process looks like, both two kind of phases. One, before we get to the point where we've made that referral or what we call a match. And then there's a second set of steps that happens after the match is made to the point at which somebody moves in. So this might look like a lot of boxes, and it is a lot of steps. That's part of what we're dealing with. There's a lot of layers to it. And don't worry about the fine print. I'll try to walk you through it, and then we'll talk a little bit about kind of how this works. So the first thing first is, say this is an existing building dedicated for folks exiting homelessness. It's a PSH site, and we've now got a situation where we've got an available unit. So obviously, physically, we need to free that up and make sure it's ready for a new household. But there's also sort of a service connection that goes with that particular resident. And so we need to unenroll that particular participant from that program. That's typically run by the county through the health agency, health services agency. So Department of Health Services and Department of Mental Health. They're basically freeing that service slot up, but we're also freeing up the actual physical unit. And so what goes with that then would be the building owner that's responsible for making that unit available, making it ready for a new household. Now that could lead to some renovations. Some could be pretty typical, could just take a week or so or a few days. Some could take longer depending on the condition of the unit. And that's not uncommon these days. But once that unit is ready, basically is ready for a new match, new referral, the caseworkers through the ICMS program, that's sort of the service model, gets notified, and they go into a separate database. So you're going to hear a lot of databases. That is a database called RMS. RMS is the database that manages the physical housing asset or the inventory in terms of the status of that particular unit or that housing program. And what they're going to do is change that status to now that it's basically it's available for match. So that's key because that's going to notify LASA, who controls the matching, that there's basically a unit that's available. So they're going to look through the unit specifications. They're going to try to figure out, okay, what's actually the profile that we're looking for. And then they're going to go back in step 6 to that community queue, and they're going to try to figure out who's an appropriate referral given the profile of that unit. That community queue is very important because that is really the universe that we're drawing from for a placement. That now triggers a notification to the point of contact connected to that client that fits that profile, fits that sort of eligibility criteria. And then they're going to work with that client to see if they're interested in pursuing the unit. It's really based on client choice. Nobody's forcing anybody to take a unit here, but assuming that there is sort of agreement to want to pursue that unit, what happens is the status of that particular unit in RMS gets changed to match in progress. Okay, so that's kind of getting to the point where there's a match made. Now let's talk about post-match and kind of what happens after that. So you've got a match basically that's in progress. The health service agency will basically make sure that that participant is enrolled in the ICMS program, and they use this CHAMP database to do that. They will switch the RMS status to match accepted, which means both parties are agreeing to kind of pursue the unit together, pursue the resource, both the owner of that resource and the client. They will then, the service worker, case workers will then work with that client to start filling out the paperwork, get the housing application done, get the documentation to verify eligibility, all of that. Very critical step. And I will note that the last year or two, there's been a change to the application process. There's now what we call a universal housing application that gets completed. This is basically like a digital format where no matter what building you're applying to, what owner you're applying to, it's still valid application. The old days, you had all these different building applications. It's very cumbersome, and it was very kind of inefficient in a way if you wanted to find a new placement. So you kind of fill out this universal housing application, and then the owner kind of receives that. The building manager, in this case, the PM, the property manager, they're going to screen that applicant based on the eligibility for that particular program, that housing unit, that building. And then they're going to, there could be some time needed to correct some things in the application. That's not uncommon. But when they're done with their step, they're going to move it to step 4, which is the housing authority, the PHA, because they're responsible for screening the applicant based on that particular rent subsidy program. So say like a Section 8 program, in this case, this is a project-based voucher, it could be another subsidy, but they need to sign off on that. And so they're doing their own screening review. If that looks good, they're going to then move to inspect the unit. They want to make sure that it meets, housing quality standards based on the federal government, sort of their thresholds. And once that unit is deemed to be acceptable, then they will issue a certificate of eligibility, a COE. That authorizes the sort of the subsidy payment to proceed and for that particular household to move in once they've got a signed lease. So that is back then to the building manager to sort of facilitate that move in. And then the final step is to notify the health agency basically that, hey, we're good to go. Somebody's moved in. We're going to switch that status now to occupied. And so that kind of completes the cycle basically that we're talking about. And a typical sort of turnover unit is what we call it kind of scenario. Now, look, this is like a lot of steps, right? This could take a matter of a month, maybe 45 days in a kind of a good way. And it could also take several months if you have to sort of find a new match or the paperwork isn't maybe where it needs to be around verification or the application. If the building fails inspection, right? Like the unit fails inspection, there's a lot of layers to it in terms of what can happen along the way. And those are all kind of not uncommon. So, but this is generally typically how it works to access a supportive housing unit in the existing sort of universe. Now, obviously, there's new buildings that lease up over time. We've constructed a lot of new buildings, and that process can be a little different, but still the similar type roles and steps that go along with it. So just wanted to give you kind of a little flavor for how that works and why that process is a little bit different than just a typical, affordable housing kind of lease up, if you will. So there you go, Mackenzie.
Thank you so much, Mark, for
Yeah.
walking us through that process. Yeah, you made a very, very difficult process seem almost simple. So thank you for, for doing that so clearly.
I wish it was. Yeah.
If you have any questions for Mark, please, as a reminder, put them in the Q&A box. We won't see them if they're in the chat. Next, I'm going to hand it over to Monica Mejia from East LA Community Corporation to discuss what it's like to navigate this process and the affordable housing process as a housing provider and with residents in mind. So I will pass it over to you.
Everybody, my name is Monica Mejia, and I'm the president of ELAC, the East LA Community Corporation. That's actually on the left, one of our buildings that you see there. It's a historic building called the Boyle Hotel, and ELAC works on the east side of LA, Boyle Heights, East LA, and incorporated areas of East LA, Lincoln Heights, sort of that whole pocket of LA. The community we work in is about 30% at the federal poverty level, many monolingual Spanish speakers, many immigrants. And so we try to help folks get into housing. We're a HUD approved housing counselor. We help people do first-time home buyer as well. But we also have been trying to work with folks to get into rental housing. And what we heard from our community is they can't get in. Sometimes there is affordable housing going up. People see it, they see the construction, they walk by and they're like, how can I get in? Why can't I get in? And over the years go by and they still can't get in, and it's frustrating. So we created a class called Affordable Housing 101. We do it mostly in person and also on Zoom. But the ones that get the most people are the classes that are in person. And we find that many times people need a one-on-one conversation, a veces en español. Sometimes you talk with your hands even, in order to fully help people fully understand some of the things that are going on to get into affordable housing. So next slide, Mackenzie. This is some of the images from the workshop that we do to give you guys a sense of what happens. We basically tell people a little bit about what's called AMIs, the area median income, which is all the apartments are like layered. There's some for people who make more, some for people who make less, and the rents are also layered. And so we kind of explain some of those parameters. This is sort of an example of how we explain that, because the fact that we have to do it this way it's complex, affordable housing. And so most people don't understand this, not necessarily should they, right? It's just the way the system evolved, that we're required to do it in complex layers to serve different levels of income. Go to the next slide, please. So some of the questions that we get all kinds of questions from people. Sometimes they ask us, what happens if I don't have a pay stub, right? Because you have to, when you apply, you have to prove your income, and that's difficult. But we talk to people about like, well, you can, if you have a bank account, you can show deposits into your bank account, and we can then verify income that way. And a lot of the applications are done via a lottery. And a lot of the applications are done via that website that you see at the top there called Haven Connect. And so when we meet with people one-on-one, we often help people just get into the Haven Connect system, which puts them into the lottery. It's a very basic batch of information that is the first. It's basically your name, address, how many people in your household, and how much your income is. And then you go into the lottery. Why don't you go into the next slide? If you are picked from the lottery, then it gets a little bit trickier. Then you have to come back and prove your income, which, as I mentioned, it can be hard, especially if you don't have a pay stub. One of the things that we notice is that many people make too low income. And it's unfortunate that folks are hoping that affordable housing will serve them. And as I showed you on the first slide, sometimes if the income levels aren't there or they don't go low enough, then it might be that you make too low income. And sometimes, it might make sense for you to try to apply with a roommate, a family member, a partner, a friend. That way, the two of you can get enough income to pay the rent for affordable housing. And that's a difficult conversation to have because, people are hoping this is going to house them. And in fact, the housing that we are providing as affordable housing providers is just not enough. We're trying to do as much as we can, as fast as we can, but we're not able to do enough units. So the last lease up we did, we had 45 units and we got 6,000 applications. So it's a tremendous need. Go to the next slide. One of the things that we are looking forward to do is, what I want to do is create a drop-in home. I call it a housing resource center. And it's a place where you can just walk in Monday through Friday and talk to somebody and maybe even access the computer and access somebody to help you, like, where can I apply? A lot of the rental listings are listed on a computer, and later LHD is going to talk to you about some new innovations on that. But sometimes people don't have a computer, or their only computer is their phone. And so it's a minuscule screen, or they don't quite speak English and they have a hard time understanding what is there. You could see some of the complexities with having to apply. So it's just not easy. Honestly, there really needs to be an in-person support place like the Housing Resource Center, which could potentially help people get into CES or get into general affordable housing. And there are two sides. The CES side, which is what Mark talked about, is where the folks who are homeless, that's how they access apartments. And the general affordable, if you're not homeless, then you access the apartment through this different system. And again, that's not necessarily understood by almost everybody in LA County. And it's really, like I said, it's hard to get into housing, and so we're here to try to at least kind of clarify a little bit about the process. One more slide. You can go through these next ones pretty quickly, Mackenzie. So I think these are 3 websites that we do refer people to. That's the LAHD website. The next one is the county's website. And then the last one is another agency, that's a Housing Resource Center agency. These are all online listings, which are great if you're like computer savvy. But if you're not computer savvy, then like, what are the solutions for helping people get into housing? We're going going into a new phase here in LA County. I'm really excited for us, for our future as LA people, because we have ULA funding and we have La Casa money, and we're going to have more apartments. But we have to do a better job at directing people and matching people to housing opportunities. And that's why I was really grateful for SCANPH to kick off this conference and let us talk about how hard it is to get in, talk about the two systems that we talked about earlier, the CES system and the general affordable system, and talk about some solutions. That's it for me. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Monica, for walking us through the realities of using this system as well as the challenges. And thank you also for doing a great segue into our next presentation. I'm going to hand it off to Angela Maciel from LAHD to talk a little bit about the upcoming changes to the portal that Monica briefly mentioned. So just give me a moment here. As you all saw, I'm having a little bit of issues with my slides, but I'm going to try to get it right for you, Angela. So just go on, you can go ahead and get started while I pull this up. And you're still on mute.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I represent the Los Angeles Housing Department Accessible Housing Program, ACHP for short. Our policy analysts monitor the accessible units, also known as ADA units. We ensure that they're leased to persons with disabilities that need the features. Next slide, please. So again, as a reminder, we will distribute the slides. So the Affordable and Accessible Housing Registry was created in 2020 to aid prospective tenants in finding and applying for affordable and accessible housing, but most importantly, to ensure that people with disabilities had the same opportunity as everyone else to benefit from the affordable and accessible housing in the city of Los Angeles. The city has partnered with Exigy to help in the development of a tenant-facing portal. Next slide, please. So as Mark mentioned previously, the permanent supportive housings are units that are filled by referrals. And for those projects, you cannot apply through our registry, but you'll find helpful links. I'll share those links further down in the process, but this is where you begin your search. Our website is accesshousingla.org, and then you create an account. Next slide, please. On this slide, you will find that there are various accounts that could be created. You can create a tenant account. You can create a housing advocate. If you're a housing advocate, you can create a housing advocate account. For our owners and property managers that are part of the covered housing, they can create accounts here to complete their compliance with ACHP, as well as now the affordable projects that are not part of the covered housing. They also can create accounts here. City employees can also create accounts. Next slide, please. This is where you begin your search. So there is you can click on begin your search, and then you will get a pop-up that will show you if you're looking for a specific area. It'll also show you what properties are available for the lottery. Next slide, please. This is an example of a property that is currently open for lottery. I think they're open until next Friday. So this is a 55 and over. So anybody that qualifies, they can take a look at this project. There is a pre-application. It's kind of highlighted in yellow. And that is where you start your pre-application. Next slide, please. You will also find additional information. I highlighted in yellow the important elements of when you're trying to read a property listing. You want to make sure that you are reading everything, because I know this property has 200 units, but only 99 units will be part of the lottery. And someone in the household has to be 55 and over. As Mark mentioned, this is a property that is considered like a combo property. It's going to have some referral-based units, and it's also going to have those affordables that Monica mentioned. Next slide, please. This is an example of permanent supportive housing, which utilizes LASA, the coordinated entry system, to get their applicants. We do require that information, even though you can't apply in our registry. We do require that it is posted on our listing, and you will find the helpful links. Those two links are available on the next slide, please. You click on those links, it'll take you to the LASA website with information about the Access Center, and then a map of the spas. And that is my presentation. And I'll hand it over to our partners, Exegy.
Great. Thank you. Yes, so that was a really fabulous introduction to the current website. I'm currently working with Angela and her colleagues at ACHP, as well as other teams within the Los Angeles Housing Department, to redesign the applicant and tenant facing components of the registry. And so we've done a lot of work like this before. If I could get the next slide. Oh, perfect. So we have actually been working on affordable housing websites for almost 10 years now, beginning with the San Francisco Mayor's Office of Housing and Community Development to develop Dahlia, which is their affordable housing search and application site. And we have since rolled out our Bay Area regional version, housingbayarea.org, which I'm going to put in the chat as an example of some of the work that we've done with similar partners to Los Angeles. So we actually have developed a software that we implement with different partners that helps replace confusing and opaque applications and search processes to make it faster to find a place that works for you. If I could get the next slide, please. So we were brought in by LAHD to do a couple of key things. And so what you can look for our work to result in is a redesigned and integrated system. So something that's connected for ACHP staff like Angela and her colleagues to make their jobs easier, but also expanded to include more opportunities in a more user-friendly way. It's also really essential that the platform be inclusive and accessible. So there are multilingual capabilities as well as accessibility features. So users are able to independently navigate or receive assistance navigating the site and finding housing. And then maintaining the pre-application process and making it even smoother and even less challenging for applicants to submit on their own. So you'll be able to complete pre-applications entirely on your mobile device. And so we're going to be working with LAHD over the course of 2 years. We started working with them in July. Our initial relaunch will be at the end of March of next year, and then we'll be continuing to iterate and improve through the end of 2026 into the first half of 2027. So we're really excited to be rolling out a series of very exciting improvements and things that will hopefully make the affordable housing search experience go much more smoothly for residents and partners. So you can look forward to the first relaunch in March of 2026. It will have a new and improved design. I do want to be clear that that doesn't mean you should wait until then to start using the tool. Your accounts and applications will remain in place. All of that will be transferred over. We're going to have a fresh coat of paint and hopefully some improved functionality that makes it that much more straightforward for you all to find a place that fits your needs. So we're very excited. I hope that you all take a look at our Bay Area portal as an example of some type of work that we've done with other partners. And I look forward to sharing with you more news about the improvements to the site as we get closer to that launch in March.
All right, thank you so much, Izzy, and thank you to all of our speakers. We're doing pretty good on time, so we're going to start with a few questions written by our team, and then we'll move over to the audience Q&A. The first question that we have is that we've heard from you all about the process, the challenges, and the impending updates to the affordable housing process in LA. And I'm wondering what opportunities and challenges you anticipate as we move toward these changes. Whoever wants to can jump in.
I mean, I can jump in on the aspect of this with respect to the PSH kind of process. I mean, it's been an effort, I think, to continue to try to improve upon where we're at. I think the expectation from the original design of it was that we would be kind of continuously evaluating it and making decisions around where it could be strengthened. Right, that's kind of a regional commitment that's kind of baked into a lot of state or mainly county city policy. They've made a lot of changes. I mean, part of what we're trying to do is make sure that the voice of those using the system is really there to inform decision making around redesign of the system. There is a kind of an effort right now to redesign CES, and that goes from everything from like A to Z, so including the assessment process and the tool that's used, which there was a lot of equity concerns around that. All the way to which we can be more flexible with the way we match and sort of lease these buildings up. And so I will commend LASA for being open to really wanting to kind of reevaluate that. But it's a very big collaboration across a lot of different systems of care. And so it's, that's the beauty and the curse of it in terms of LA. Like we've got a lot of systems that are involved and we're stronger for that. But it does mean a lot of alignment is needed. So it's just a constant exercise. We're working towards it. I think we've made some good improvements. I think if you're out there using the system sort of as a potential applicant or somebody experiencing homelessness, just continue to speak up with your points of contact, the agencies that are serving you. Let them know what that experience has been so we can kind of use that at the system level. But it's very much underway. Still a long way to go. I think we want to see these timelines reduced. We want to see the system even easier to access and I think we all want to, sort of realize the vision of it originally, which was to really do right by everybody. Yeah.
I might add that I love the ability to use technology to help us do a better job to house people. But the question also is like, how do you advertise all these websites? I mean, I listed 3 in our presentation, and folks don't know where these websites are. And there isn't like a billboard, it's not an LA Times, not every newspaper in Espanol in all the languages, all the different regional papers, all the community centers, and that only gets you folks that are able to use a website, right? There's folks that can't. And accessing CES, which I think we put what the acronym means, which is coordinated entry system, which is how homeless people get into housing. That's very hard to do. Like, where is it? Where is CES? And there are many folks that require a one-on-one conversation to figure out how to get into housing, whether they're homeless or whether the homeless system is the right one for them or the general affordable. For many folks, it requires a oral conversation and face-to-face with a housing navigator or someone to help them. So there's a tremendous challenge for us in LA County to truly like make it easier for people to find housing. And I hope that we started this conversation, we even have a chance to really give people even maybe to choose where they can live. Wouldn't that be incredible, right? If they can actually be part of an analysis of like, I want to live near a park, or I want to live near a park at my hospital, or I want to live near this school, and actually have choice rather than just take what you can get, which is so many times how we live.
Yeah, I think from the technology side, technology is very important, but it's not the only important thing when it comes to rethinking how we can make this process go more smoothly for folks. Coordination with local partners is really essential, making sure that we are, rather than duplicating efforts, contributing and uplifting each other's efforts. And so I know one conversation we've had with this website redesign is how can we include links to other resources? How can we get people in touch with a counselor if they need that one-on-one conversation or if they can't access a digital product on their own? How can we provide the opportunity to post different types of opportunities while also not making it more confusing or providing just too much slush for somebody to wade through? So definitely a lot of opportunity with the relaunch of a website to reconsider some of those things. And forums like this are really essential to making sure that we do that in the most effective way.
And I will add this, our affordable accessible housing registry does produce a lot of applicants. So what we do ask folks is to really take a look at that marketing flyer and really apply if you qualify, because they do break down like the AMI, like Monica mentioned, the AMI, because I mean, in the long run, you are going to have to demonstrate that you have the ability to pay for that unit. So if you don't qualify and you apply, you'll probably just be denied. So I mean, I know it's difficult to hear that. But I'm glad that Monica put out there that her organization does help individuals brainstorm on how they can apply with friends and family members to qualify.
Thank you all so much for your thoughtful responses. It seems like there are two things that advocates can take from this is that we need to increase awareness and we need to continue working together to break down these barriers to housing. So thank you for both answering the questions on, what we can, what should be done and also telling us how we can do it. So now I want to pass it over to my colleague, Aisha Mansour, to lead us through a couple questions from the audience.
Hi, folks. Thanks, Mackenzie, for the introduction. My name is Aisha Mansour. I'm the Senior Regional Advocacy Associate for SCANPH. I'll turn to the Q&A box and answer some questions. Monica, I believe there are a few questions about Haven Connect and whether it's only for ELAC or for all counties or only LA. So I'll give you a chance to answer that.
I see. So one question was from Soraya. So when's the next class? Oh God, I wish I had that information. Let me get that information, and then I'll request that Mackenzie can send it out to all of the folks that have signed up for the class for today's workshop. We've been doing them about 3 times a year. So I think I need to see I don't know if we're gonna do one more in 25, but the next one would probably be in 26. And just to kind of answer that, Haven Connect is a very common website that property managers use when folks apply for housing. Depending on, this is the frustrating thing, like depending on what building you're applying for, that management company may use a different method. So it is frustrating that, ELAC is one developer, and then there's many other developers who are members of SCANPH, and there's also actually market rate affordable housing developers. And then there's even units that are included in market rate buildings. And finding all of those, they often have different application processes. And it does add to the difficulty and frustration with trying to find housing, which is kind of why we're here, trying to find a way to at least put it all in one place. But that would even only be for the city of LA, because then there's stuff in the county or other cities too. So it really is a difficult process. And yeah, the Affordable Housing 101 classes are open to anyone.
Awesome. Thank you, Monica. Let me pull up another question. Somebody asked, is there an available listing of all the affordable housing locations? I know Angela had marked wanting to answer that. So
Yeah,
I'll give you the chance to do.
Yeah, so I put it in the chat, but for the Affordable Accessible Housing Registry, I linked the website. It's accesshousingla.org, and you'll see the accessible unit wait list for properties never closes. So if you have a disability where you need an accessible unit, those waiting lists are open. It's the conventional unit wait list that most of them are closed, but you may have an opportunity to sign up on our registry and be made aware of new developments that are coming online. So that's a good website to link yourself to, add your name to the list so you can be notified.
There's a few other questions that I might just take a quick stab at to kind of get through some of them. So Eduardo asked about pet policies, and it's now the law in the state of California that every tenant can have, I think it's at least one pet. So hopefully that'll help when looking for housing. It shouldn't be a barrier. I think there's some limits, like maybe it can't be a horse, but I think that's pretty broad law that many pets are an option for folks. And so that was one. Mark, there's a question there about how to get into CES, including places that are difficult to find the location, the hours are limited, or you need an appointment. I know where we work in the east side of LA, the closest CES location is in Skid Row. And so it's hard to get there, I gotta say. It's hard to get there, hard to find the place, and hard to maneuver. And ¿dónde está CES? Do you have any suggestions for people to how they can find and get into CES?
I mean, it is a limited network in terms of those access centers, like you said, Monica. I mean, they've been very clear about wanting to centralize a lot of those within the various spas. So there's sort of a gatekeeping of sorts in terms of how folks can kind of access that. So, I mean, there's no way around that other than if you're in some other kind of programming that's not connected to an access center, like I was saying, if you're, street outreach or an interim site or something like that, you would certainly be eligible for that. But that is by design. They've made it that way, and I know it's limiting because it may not be near folks or accessible. But that's where it stands right now.
Mm-hmm. So when I know folks that are in a shelter, like a formal shelter, they can be put into CES, but there's so many people who are homeless and maybe they're not in a shelter, or they're couch surfing or even living in a car. And it's more difficult to access CES, which is sort of one of the problems we have.
Yeah, they want to see some sort of program connection because that's what they want to draw from, I think, unfortunately. So hopefully they can find a way to try to get enrolled in something and then they're on that list. They're on that queue, but that can be difficult. But that's the kind of the key so they can do an assessment. They've got some sort of understanding of what folks need. But yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Great, thank you. I know, Mark, there was a question in the chat. How will federal cuts affect the search and access of PSH?
Yeah, I was just trying to type that. I mean, it's not going to help. I mean, is the short answer. I think we're still absorbing what those impacts are going to be. I'm not hearing anything immediately saying that, the way in which we match or support folks to lease up is going to be necessarily directly kind of affected right now, but I don't see how it couldn't be if the infrastructure is kind of impacted, there's less resources to go around. And what's pending on the continuum of care cuts that we're expecting in terms of less permanent housing options, no doubt it's going to create more inflow, I think, into homelessness. So there's a lot of concern around what this impact is going to be over the long term. Yeah, I wish we had more answers.
I know another question in the chat was whether there's a website where they can access housing listings throughout the county or just the city of LA. Wanted to give you guys a chance, if there is a resource like that we could share.
Well, I think we're going to share the slides. And so you'll be able to see the 3 websites that were in my presentation, which is one for the county, one for the city, one that's a little bit broader. And it may have some options as well in the Palm, I don't think it has the Palm Springs area because it's generally LA County. So that's San Bernardino County and Riverside County. And so I think you might have to try those county websites to find options over there. And there's another question on the chat for folks that are retiring in the near future, which is a lot of folks, just given the demographics of our population. And depending on how much Social Security income you have, and it varies, right? You might have enough income to qualify for what's called 30% AMI. Remember, we've been talking about the AMI levels. So often there's 30%, 50%, 60%. Those are common income and rent levels. And so the 30% AMI units are in high demand. Honestly, they all are. But that's kind of that's a possibility. It could be that the 50% AMI level might work, or the 60% AMI level might work. As Alicia was mentioning earlier, Angela was mentioning earlier that if it doesn't, then sometimes people do have to think about how to assemble their family or their household or find a roommate to be able to afford a place. It's just some of the difficult realities of our housing economy.
Okay, we have another question in the chat. If you qualify and are housed, what happens as your income goes up? Do you lose this housing? What would cause you to have to move out? Do you guys have an answer to that? Is there generally assistance in finding a new unit at your new AMI level?
You don't have to move out.
Okay, great.
Yeah, people's incomes go up and down. The basic minimum is that if you have to pay rent, you pay the rent. And if you have a Section 8 voucher that comes with your apartment, it'll help you regardless of your income.
Looking through the questions right now to see any others. For those of you that are asking about the resources, they will be shared. Once the webinar is over, Mackenzie will send them out in addition to other materials. So you guys will get access to the slides and the websites that Monica shared as well. Let's see. I know some folks had questions about understanding income in the context of the larger county. For those that maybe are applying online and aren't familiar with their AMI income level, I assume the websites kind of break those down for folks.
I don't think so. No, I don't think so. As I mentioned, this housing process is really difficult. So when something is available for rent, they usually will kind of publish the income levels and the rent levels when there's a building open. And then when it's not open, sometimes it's just not published. So it's not easy to find that information. And I think that's pretty good feedback for the city of LA as part of the information that might be listed on the website once it's ready for launch.
Okay, thank you. Let me scan. We have a lot of questions coming in, so just making sure we try to get to all of them. I know someone asked for those working for electeds and have constituents that come and ask them for housing availability. Any recommendations on where we send them to? I know the websites, Monica, are great resources, but if you folks have any other recommendations on where to send folks to, we'd be happy to share those.
So most of the elected officials that I have worked with know where folks can go if they need to access CES. As I mentioned, it's not that easy to access. So if you have family members who are homeless, you can call your elected official and they can try to help you find that location that's nearby. As I mentioned, the one near us is in Skid Row, so it's not that convenient. So they do usually have referral options, but the housing is so hard to get in. The crisis is big.
Okay, and then we'll maybe take one more question. Let's see. I know some are coming in the chat as well, so I'm trying to keep track of everything. Mackenzie, you were saying there was a question you saw, correct?
Yeah, there was a question that asked from the landlord perspective, who has offered multiple properties to the same service provider. He finds it challenging to connect directly with the various departments that need crisis housing. And he would like feedback, if you have any, or suggestions on how he can better market his properties and find higher quality service providers. If that is out of our scope, that's okay. That's also an answer. I just wasn't sure if there was any part of the system that connects landlords and developers.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I understand this question, but a lot of these developers, they're in the lease-up calls with the matchers. Like I sit on a lot of lease-up calls, and the developers and property management staff sit in the same lease-up calls when there's permanent supportive housing. So when they're asking about connecting to a different service provider, I think they're all segmented. There's segments, they're broken up by parts of the city. So if your property is permanent supportive housing, those are the service providers that are servicing that area. I'm not sure if that answered his question.
Thank you so much, everyone, for your questions. And thank you to our panelists for all of your answers. I want to thank you all of our panelists for being here and for all of the amazing work you do in LA and beyond. I also want to thank everyone who is here to attend for showing up and trying to show up better to support our communities that need affordable housing. If anyone is interested in staying involved with SCANPH or Residents United Network LA, I'm sharing 2 QR codes here that you can scan. I will also share these links in the follow-up email. 2 ways you can get involved are by joining our Housing Justice Advocacy Committee mailing list, which is our way of inviting members into the advocacy work we do. We send out emails frequently and meet quarterly to discuss key advocacy pushes and campaign and policy updates. And also, as you know, Residents United Network is our local resident organizing network. If you're interested in engaging as a member or just staying up to date with what we're doing, you can scan this QR code and join our mailing list as well. Again, I'll send these out in the recap, so no need to rush to scan the QR codes. But thank you all so much for being here. We'll give you 3 minutes back to your day, and we really appreciate it. And we look forward to the next steps of the affordable and accessible housing registry and the advocacy work that comes with it. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you, folks.